as we come into the end of the year, and I would say no later than Christmas, New Year's of Northern Hemisphere. So the awareness that'll happen with the planting of right now, not the harvest of crops that have been maturing, but this planting going on right now, the temperatures are so bizarre and cool and wet and below normal. That sunlight reaching the planet's surface to grow crops in the southern hemisphere is being greatly interfered with by this ash and water vapor in the atmosphere from the Tonga eruption. So there's going to be this awareness period as we in the northern hemisphere come into Christmas that, whoa, they didn't get it in the ground down there. And that realization of the shock it will send through the rest of the system. The collapse would be a good thing because you know there could be a bottom somewhere. A simple crash would be welcomed. A massive crash would be welcomed. But a non-functional economy, where values can't even be established for companies anymore, is a scary proposition for the planet. And I do welcome you this evening, this morning, this afternoon, wherever you reside on the beautiful blue planet, spinning through the spiral arm of our galaxy. Hello, and welcome to the deindustrialization starting gun. We knew it was inbound anyway. So what we would consider the beginning of the absolute end of Europe as you knew it. BASF has stated that they are going to permanently shutter their chemical, fertilizer, medicine, and every other plant across Germany where BASF operates. This is a huge statement. They were going to start with the first 6 square mile facility that has been continuously operating since 1952. Never shut down, not even one day. But now they're going to shutter the plant. It's becoming too expensive, and it's understood once they shut it down, they haven't ever turned these levers off before. So to turn things back on, it's already a risk of hazard for explosion, etc. They're not even going to take the chance. It's just shuttered. Now, they said they're moving over to China to try to produce. How long is that going to take us? How long would it take for a German firm to set up with a zero COVID policy that's absolutely no movement across the country, complete shutdown in China, and then they want to start up full massive operations to equal what was just shut down across Europe? And with that awareness also, the money is flowing out of Europe. Credit Suisse had to have 2 emergency bail-ins. So we'll see where it goes. This is truly the beginning of it. It looks like there's an institutional run for the banks and all liquidity pulling out of Europe as we speak. Because this is it. They have completely shut down all industry for chemical, fertilizer, etc., medicine across Germany. And most other places in Europe were relying on that same chemical output for their processes. So now what? This is where we sit today. So Ransom, glad you're joining me tonight. This is going to set Europe back 100 years, taking it back to an agrarian society, full deindustrialization, machine repair parts for all farm equipment that was coming out of places in Europe is stopped. So whatever we get is what we get. The supply chains are locked up super glue style. And 'tis the season, I guess, Ransom, 'tis the season.
Yes, it is the season. I've been thinking about all of this. We've been talking about the same kind of thing of 2 societies forming, one being filled up with the elite or people that have plenty of money to take the hit when these economies start collapsing. And I'm a patterned person myself. So I was thinking about this book that Ron Paul wrote in 2008. I think it was called Don't Start the Revolution Without Me. But basically he talks about in the book how if we don't stop participating so much in UN and the NATO and policing the world and funding everything using these fiat bankers as the backbone of it, that eventually we would have to be there policing and dealing with the collapse of Europe when they fell into communism, each country by country. And I've had that same thought, from recent events that's been going on and how they are obviously shutting down things and trying to restart the entire system. And it made me think a lot about some recent videos I watched, one of them with Klaus and the other one with Bill. And they pretty much break down the entire plan, or as they're calling it amongst themselves, the 4th Industrial Revolution. The difference being in this Industrial Revolution, they're trying to create something that they've never had before, which is a complete top-down control system where they control every product in the world. And that includes people because, people are considered products by each nation independently and as a world government as a whole. But Klaus basically breaks it down, talking about this fast implementation of the new innovative drive that the fourth industrial revolution is not going to be a digital one as people think, and they're kind of concentrated on that because that revolution already happened. But instead, this will be a new revolution of brain research, nanotech, and the digital, combining all these things. It's a fusion of the digital, physical, and biological. And then when you start breaking down these things to actually figure out what he's talking about, let's take the digital aspect of it. That's complete control of all the products, food products, land resources, water resources, etc. All of that kind of thing is in that digital thing. But the main purpose for that entire rebuilt system is the tracking and tracing of every last product. And then you have the physical, which is that they're moving to control your ownership of things and to dismantle and change the definition of what's called human rights. Number 3 would be the biological aspect of what he's talking about. And that would be to control all of the products that maintain this biological economy that they're building. And then he goes on to talking about that all products and systems, obviously that includes people, have to be changed. They have to individually change who we are as a human being, and 2, what we do with our time. And then let's get to that infrastructure. What does he mean by that they need to replace the infrastructure, and how would they accomplish that? Well, you've been talking a lot about them shutting down steel plants in order to usher in this new generation of green energies. How are they going to do that? Well, on its face, easily you could tell that if we had a worldwide war, starting maybe in Europe, where most of these actions are happening right now, you would see that the European nations independently and as a whole are kind of screwed right now because they have cut off all of their outside energy input that they need to power society in a oil-based economy and power, which is the only one that's feasible. But they're going to shut down Europe. So what does that necessarily mean? A lower reduction of living standard. And it necessarily means that there are going to be massive food shortages because of changing over to this new system. Now, how do you get rid of the infrastructure? Because, people are going to be mad when they know there's a power plant over there or a coal plant over there that can produce plenty of power to give them electricity, warm their homes, and power their cars, things like that. They're going to be upset. So necessarily you have to cause strife amongst the population, and the best way to do that is with famine and war. So they can never concentrate on the bigger issue, which is the transformation of their civilization. War is the only thing that can change immediately within a short amount of time, everything from civilization to infrastructure. And Europe's going to be in a position where they're going to have to take a friend, which will either be the Anglo-Saxon Empire of the UK and the United States and the Middle East, where they could get direct energy from those places. And they don't really need the middleman of the United States and the oil companies here. And at the same time, people are telling you to your face that they are going to destroy this entire civilization, starting with the infrastructure and the way that humans act and behave.
World we're marching into is, you're right, it's a reset, and it's frightening because that is truly the way so many societies have been instantly changed in the past, was to take the path of war. Because that will change, disrupt, bankrupt, destroy, create new alliances, new economies form out of it. As a fan of economic history, every time there is a global war, there comes to be a new reserve currency. Like, you just can't accomplish the new reserve currency without having the global war. You need both. So looking forward, saying, wait, this U.S. dollar has run its course. Now what's going to happen? Something needs to break, literally, for a new form of global currency to come in. And I think that is going to be what we're looking at here, because all signs are pointing to some escalation. So we're entering new paradigms here, and as this magnetic field resonance on the sun changes, our brains perceive differently. Our abilities to bend this malleable substance in front of us called matter, this energy field that we play in, we should be able to harmonize with it and have even more of an output and effect. And that is exactly why so many distractions are inbound here. See, I think it's a twofold inbound problem. The closer we get to the food shortages, that'll be uncontrollable because humans are uncontrollable. The only thing that really can throw everything of all their planning and scenarios out of kilter would be famines and hungry people. You just can't control them. They're too unknown what the response will be. There's probably like 100 responses they can take, and you just don't know which one it will be. So the closer we get to these food shortages globally, the more distraction there'll be, and it'll have to be even a larger distraction. But then at the same time, in parallel with this, the sun is changing its frequency. And the more the innate abilities of humanity start to arise, the more fear, the more distraction, the larger the grandiose distraction needs to come in too. At the exact same time, it's like a double layering, if you will. We talked about this a couple times before, but I'm really starting to see it. Every time there's an uptick in crop losses, there's an uptick in global events. So mark my timeline here for you. As we come into the end of the year, and I would say no later than Christmas, New Year's of Northern Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere is going into its planting. Some of it's being harvested now, so there's not an all blanketing thing where everything's planted at the same time and it's all harvested at the same time. It's much more like that in the Northern Hemisphere than the Southern Hemisphere. Although we got the winter wheat and all these types of things too. But just as a general rule of thumb, say 60% of the crops are being planted in the Southern Hemisphere now. The other 40% that were planted before the volcanic cooling are now being harvested-ish. We look at the massive losses across New South Wales. This is the most flooding losses that they've ever experienced in terms of the wheat crop. We start to see things like this, and then, government's trying to respond and say, well, we only lost 14 or 15% of our production. It wasn't as high as 20% like we predicted. This is all across Brazil now. So the awareness that will happen with the planting of right now, not the harvest of crops that have been maturing, but this planting going on right now, the temperatures are so bizarre and cool and wet and below normal. That sunlight reaching the planet's surface to grow crops in the Southern Hemisphere is being greatly interfered with by this ash and water vapor in the atmosphere from the Tonga eruption. So there's going to be this awareness period as we in the Northern Hemisphere come into Christmas that, whoa, they didn't get it in the ground down there. And that realization of the shock it will send through the rest of the system. At the same time, this BASF, once the realization is there, it is going to run like a scalded dog, and this thing is going to be the next reason for everything stopping. Currently, it's electrical prices, natural gas shortages. You can see how much damage that did. It stopped all industry pretty much. But this BASF, this could be one of the biggest game-changing events since Hiroshima and Nagasaki. To shut down the chemical industry across Germany, which almost every other country relies on for products to produce on those base materials, they've literally just shut down all production pretty much on the planet that involves anything chemical. That's where it's gone to. And then you saw the response with Credit Suisse. They need the emergency bailouts, not from one other institution, two needed to come in to rescue Credit Suisse. Now, it's going to start, the money's starting to pull out immediately out of there after this announcement. What is going to be the next distraction? Because we have these two things. The food shortages will be well known. This is where the populace panics by the end of the year because it'll be water cooler talk. Me and Ransom talked about this in the beginning of the year. By the end of the year, we'll have digital rationing cards beginning. I wouldn't even say collapsing economy, a completely non-functional economy where values can't even be established for companies anymore. And everything shipping-wise across the planet, including the Mississippi dryness and barges stuck everywhere, as well as over in the Danube, many places with barge traffic in Europe are halted as well. So this is a non-functioning economy. The collapse would be a good thing because there could be a bottom somewhere, and eventually it would bounce back up and strengthen, and everybody do the hoorah, and then governments would throw money, and it would be never-ending money printing quantitative easing 3.0, and we'd be back to the rocket ship again. A simple crash would be welcomed. A massive crash would be welcomed. But a non-functioning, unable to even value anything is a scary proposition for the planet. Because when we do come into the last part of the year here, I've already been told this. There's going to be a disconnect between futures markets and cash price. For example, today, let's call corn $6.50 on the futures market, say Chicago Board of Trade over, the CBOE. The realization that the corn won't be there at the volumes is going to send somebody with cash saying, I will give you $7.50 for that. And the next person like Ransom would outbid me and say, no, I'll give you $8 for it. Cash. Forget the future pricing. I'll give you cash $8. And somebody else will come over from another country like Egypt and go, we'll give you $9. And there's going to be this continuous bid out. And I have been told by somebody who I think is, quite reliable over the years, that they're going to be looking at something like double over the price quoted on the futures market in the cash market. So let's say $7 rounded up even. It'll be $21 on the cash market. So no farmers are going to deliver into a regular what you consider futures market because they can get an extra $14 for the same exact bushel on a cash basis. The complete disconnect where farmers will just say, we're not even going to go into the futures game anymore. I mean, a corporate's going to have to, but not everybody's corporate, which is probably going to be a good 50% of all grain trades are going to be done cash or on the cash markets. So there's going to be huge discontinuity is what they call it, or a break between reality and pricing, where cash will be the king to buy product that futures markets and stock markets and ETFs and all these things that to hold everything and the glue that holds it together will be whatever. That's where it's going to. And that's really kind of terrifying because at that point, it's just whoever has the most money gets it in a very limited supply. No mechanisms for companies to be able to secure supply, except a very limited amount of probably delivery into the futures markets and the physical side. There just won't be enough for what we consider Kellogg's to, I know they do a lot of their own vertical. They have a lot of their own farms that grow for them, but they also pull from other points outside as well. They just don't have it. They can't have everything commercial grow by themselves on there for contract. So there's a huge amount of non-functional economy things coming up, and that's worse than a crashed economy. It just stops functioning to the point where they're going to start asking for other things to come in, and then, enter the central bank digital currencies. You see, Ransom, how perfectly it's planned for the execution. It's not even locked up. It's just non-functional the way it's done because nobody trusts the values or the fiat currencies from other nations. So we're going to have to bring something new in that people will trust again. Central bank digital currencies. Isn't that convenient? Where it brings us to is you're going to have to be responsible for some of your own food production off of centralized systems, and things that you would rely on for centralized delivery are actually going to break down. So if you have a chance to get out and get some chemical fertilizers, I would do that over the weekend. If you have a chance to get any types of chemical pest control, I would do that on the weekend. And as I was stating in earlier programs, I'm not a fan of putting any kind of chemical out on my food. But at this point, where your garden is going to be part of your food, to dust once or twice for a whole season, maybe once every 3 months or something like this, once every 2 months, that's going to be now inside my range of back on the doables. Before I strayed away from it, we lost the plants. Okay, we learned how to take care of Japanese beetles. We learned how to take care of the slugs, put some stuff over, get the butterflies out of there, keep the caterpillars off. Okay, it's a learning process. That's because I could go buy it elsewhere, so I didn't really care. But as we march through this winter here, you got to get your winter gardens up. You're going to have to start to think about doing things that you would not do before. And for me, to use a little chemical spray, like 7 is a good one. You can actually dust your plants off with that a couple times, like I say, once every 2 months to get rid of the pests. I'm going to go that direction. And I think a lot of people are going to have to also, because it's great to talk about organics and it's fun to try to live it. But in the reality, you can lose your crop and still live because you can get it in another place. But when it's coming down to it, centralized systems breaking down. So also think about sulfur, boron, and iodine for your soils. in addition to what you might want to add with kelp and mycorrhiza and alfalfa and these sort of things. Going to get to the point where most centralized systems are not going to be able to functional unless you got cash to operate in that. But I don't know how clued in or how tapped in people are to be able to get deliveries of corn. Because you got to realize one single barge, for example, that's stuck on the Mississippi River, one barge, one shuttle is what they call it, one shuttle carries 70 18-wheeler trucks inside it. And they're pushing 50 of those down on one tug. So, you're looking at 3,500 18-wheeler trucks to move the same amount as one tug does down the Mississippi. But they're all stuck in the mud, literally in the mud. They can't even load. And they're looking for places to offload for the season and just dump it on the shore. Hope for the best. Come and pick it up next year. Like, this is where we've gone already. Centralized systems are in the process of a complete collapse, and the finance is in the process of complete non-functionality. So where does that leave you, the person? Well, you're going to have to really start getting it on with your neighbors here and figuring this out. And the rush will be on probably at the same time that the awareness of the food in the Southern Hemisphere now being grown, where people will say, wow, I need to go out and grow my own food. I need a shovel. Okay, not too many of those laying around anymore. So the run will be on for everything garden related. And by that point, you really do want to have your chemicals, your fertilizers, et cetera, pulled back, because even now, if you're going to get fertilizer, it's still going to be 3 or 4 times more expensive than 12 months ago. But looking in the future, it's going to be a bargain now. You might not even get it, the inavailability of it after all people run to it at the same time. And then the whole slow process of learning how to build soils back using all these leaves that are falling down right now to create compost and give some sort of carbon matter back into the soil. You can only hold on to your preps for so long, Ransom. Like, how long do you think your preps will last? 6 months, a year, but then they're gone, right? So you're going to have to grow, and me too, to grow, to refill all that, so I don't have to dive in 100% on that. You want to supplement in. You don't want to dive in 100% unless it's the emergency. You want to be able to grow and supplement in and slowly pull out things and rotate if you can. Good weekend to do an inventory of what you might be holding.
Right. It just seems like they've pushed the hype in the scenarios, keeping them distracted. And then, you add all of these other things that they're really doing. It's not like they're not real things. So they knew exactly that this time period will be setting up maybe difficulties for some people farming. But I honestly think small communities all over the place, kind of getting together and taking control. We're allowed to grow here in our front yard, or no, we're going to be doing this, or we're going to use the city resources for a reservoir or something like that. They could be doing that. And that's going to be what's going to have to happen is in the local areas. And I don't think it would really be that hard for a nation, even though, sometimes I wonder when I look at the younger generations than I am, and, it's easy to get on the internet and lose faith in humanity. But the truth is, it doesn't take as much know-how as people think it does to just resort back to previous generations and use some of their intellect and ingenuity and prior knowledge, like canning and storing and all of these things. And the truth is in America, we've been so long with excess and wastefulness. Maybe this is an antidote, this reset to some of those problems. But I think as a people, we're smart enough to revert back to the way that some of the people did it before. There have been plenty of problems like this. The Great Depression is one everybody generally knows about, at least my age and up. And those people perfected, at least people out, not in the cities, but outside, they perfected gardening in their yard and their small lots of property. And they found all kinds of ways to make everything stretch, and that's where we got this whole jarring community. And if that expanded, we can, as a people, tell these groups no. You can tell the supermarket no thanks. Think about this, is if your small town or village allowed a farmer's market with less rules, and somehow kind of got out the bigger state regulators and federal regulators, they could have a better supermarket in each town than anything you're going to find at Walmart. And talking about people using pesticides and things like that as a necessity to grow their crops without them messing up so that people don't starve to death. That's a reality if you have a big farm and stuff. And sometimes you might not be able to deal with each little problem every single year. You know, you got molds and bugs. So of course we want to eat organic and mostly toxic free food. But think about the stuff that's coming from the grocery store already. Even the organic food there is saturated in glyphosate. You're not really getting clean food by buying organic foods. It's cleaner. It has less chemicals and the farming techniques are better. But as far as nutritional value and things like that, it's really not that, they're very comparable is what I'm saying. So if you were forced to on a land, like deal with a large invasion of pests in order for you to eat for the next couple of years, well, let's face it, you're going to go ahead and eat a little bit of glyphosate so that everybody's bellies are not empty.
I don't know if I go with the glyphosate. I would be with the weeds. I'm interested in the pests because you can spend the time to get down and get those weeds out of the way. And you could put a bunch of mulch down in there and, cover up some of those weeds if you really want to and get really thick beds of mulch so you can easily take away the grass and whatnot through the days. Go out there and spend half an hour. See, that's the only problem, though, is you got to spend half an hour weeding. That half hour could be better utilized to try to raise up some chicken or something else like this. Checking in on the livestock and checking in on the animals instead of a half hour down there, pulling weeds every other day. Efficiencies are going to be needed too. We're going to need to get into some of these irrigated drip systems too. And those are quite efficient. And you set your timer up and then boom, you can at least save time on the watering by setting up a drip irrigation system and then targeting the roots itself versus the plants like a regular sprinkler does, because that water will sit in there and you might get mold and fungus and whatnot. But if you can just target the roots with the water, then a lot of times your plants are much better off because they don't have to dry out every day. And then what happens if it rains and it doesn't dry out for 4 or 5 days, 6 days? That's just, you're waiting for snails to get in there. You're waiting for slugs. You're just waiting for something to dive in there to use that water to help its own next generation of insect move through its life cycle. You're probably going to have to start eating some things that you normally would throw away. Like I've gotten into the habit of doing this, not because I'm starving, but if you pull a large leaf of something off and a quarter of it's non-usable, might be yellow, you can see an insect, you can see some eggs there, I'll actually just tear the bad part off and then keep the other part of the leaf. Or sometimes it's only 50% good, but still voluptuous and green and full of vitamins, micronutrient. But when you start to see insect pests on it, you got to use baking soda when you wash and rinse your vegetables. Baking soda, easy. That alkaline will kill almost every insect crawling on a plant. But then, you're probably going to need to turn that into a stir fry just to be extra safe because you don't want to have anything going down into the gut. And, you got to take extra time to wash that off. You go down for a week or you get some sort of, something in the stomach or in the intestinal tract. That's a sure death sentence right there. If you don't have the proper antibiotics or something, A, to kill the parasites out first and then B, clean your guts out, you're absolutely going to be in some serious trouble. You're going to be barely functional at best until you can get the correct medicines to cure you. And that's no joke. If you're going to get dysentery or you're going to get some kind of amoebic dysentery or you're going to have something like that, worms or something living inside you, these are the types of things you have to take into consideration. Probably going to eat a lot more boiled and stir-fried stuff just so you can make sure you kill the pest versus having fresh salads. We have the extra time to wash it and really search for it and those are luxuries. Time is a luxury.